Hi guys, I'm here back again to continue this session on intercompany STOs and intra-company STOs. In the last session, we saw the business process and its relevance in setting up the ISTO process in SAP. So now let's go ahead and see what are the requirements or the prerequisites in order to process an intercompany STO transaction in SAP. As I had told you in my previous session, we need master data and some configuration setup. Okay, so you need to have the master data, that is the customer master, vendor master, and the material master. As you see over here in green, marked in green, customer and vendor, and the material marked in pink. And you also need to have the configuration setup done. Yeah, here you see the screenshot, which I have taken a screenshot from the SAP IMG implementation guide to showcase you the nodes that are responsible for setting up the ISTU. So this node falls under the customization or configuration. Well, let's check one by one and see how each of these components are set up. Apart from this setup that I have talked about, master data, configuration, you also need to make sure you have copy control setup. So the copy controls should exist between the delivery document type NLCC and the intercompany document type IV. And in case of intra-company, you need to have the copy control existing between the document type, delivery document type NL and F8. The second scenario wouldn't be eligible for billing, hence I have only set up a pro forma invoice which might be required in case of customs or cross-border transports, shipments or shipments. And in the first case, you surely need a billing document, and hence we have set up an actual billing document which will carry out postings. Okay, so these are the steps that you need to make sure are ready in your system before you actually go ahead and process the intercompany STO. So let's get into the system, deep dive into the system, and understand what each of these parameters and how they are set up. What are each of these parameters and how they are set up, basically. So we have a vendor. As I told you, we need to create a vendor the which represents the sending plant. So in my case, I have the vendor V3000 already created. The vendor should be created in the Canadian uh, company code. Reason being, it's a vendor for Canada. And in the end, you should link the vendor that is created to the sending plant. Sending plant in our case is the US plant 3000. So I have this vendor created for company code 4500 in purchasing org 4500, that is Canadian company code. So this vendor will represent the sending plant to this Canadian company code. At the same time, I have made sure that I create a customer which represents the receiving plant. Reason being, this is the plant which is procuring materials or getting material from this company code, US company code. Hence, I need to make sure that I have to bill this particular Canadian company code for whatever material US it's procuring from the US plant. Hence, we create a pseudo customer which will represent the plant, and similarly we create a pseudo vendor which will represent the US plant. So this customer will represent the Canadian plant, and the vendor would represent the US plant in the end. Make sure the customer exists in the sending plant's sales area, that is 3010.00, and the vendor exists in the receiving plant's purchasing org. Let's check this out in the system. Here we go. I have the system open. We need to check the vendor master first. See, setting up the vendor master is pretty much similar to the way you set up other vendor masters. Guys would be very much aware of it. I have already created this vendor master. So this vendor, which represents the plant 3000, should exist in company code 4500 and purchasing org 4500. I will check the purchasing data tabs or checkboxes in order to see how the purchasing data is set up, because that is the data which is relevant to us as of now, because there is one check in this particular section, one field in this particular section which is responsible and very much important in linking this vendor to the supplying plant. That is the way system recognize this customer represents the supplying plant of US. I get into the purchasing data. Here you are. The vendor is created in the purchasing of 4500, and in order to link it, we need to get into the extras and additional purchasing data. I've already linked it. You see the plant to which this vendor is linked is 3000, which is the New York or the US plant. So this is the vendor which represents the US plant, and it is a vendor for the Canadian company code, because this vendor is going to supply some material to the Canadian company code. Well, this is a pretty much important assignment or master data that you need to make sure it is already set up before processing intercompany stock transport orders. So this is only in case of ISTO scenarios. In case of STO scenarios, you need not set up a vendor master. You can directly use plans, because that is just a plan to plan transfer. I'll show that to you when we are checking or creating samples in the system. This is about the vendor. Now let's get into the customer master. I told you we need to create a customer which should represent the Canadian plant or the receiving plant, because that is the plant which has ordered the material from the US plant, and we need to represent it with a customer, pseudo customer, because we want to bill that particular plant. So in order to bill that plant, you need to bill a customer which represents that receiving plant of Canada. So here you go. I have this customer CU4510, which represents plant 4510. It has been created in the sales area. It should be created in the sales area of US 3001, because when you are creating an intercompany invoice, this is the sales area that comes into picture, and hence you need to make sure that the customer exists in the sending plant's sales area. Sending plant in our case is the US plant. So US sales area is 3010. So here I have the customer, and the customer exists in the sales area. If I get into this, you see the data. You see this is the sales area data for this customer. I have attached a pricing procedure so that I have a relevant pricing procedure determined when an intercompany document is created in the name of this customer, or in the end in the name of the Canadian plant. In other words, I have some shipping data maintained in order to determine the route in the purchase order shipping tab, which I'll be showing to you when I'll create samples. So don't get confused. And you have the partner functions to represent in whose name the bill should be created and all. So I have this customer created, which represents the Canadian plant existing in the sending plant or the US company's sales area. So we have these two things set up. The next prime thing that you need to have set up is the material. The material should exist or should be created for both Canadian and the US plant. Reason being that we are transferring the material, and hence it needs to exist in both plants. Second thing is that the material should also exist in the sales area of the US plant. Okay, so let's check if this material is actually, I have this finished material, FERT material type, created in both plants and both sales areas as well. So let's check this at the table level. So I will display two tables in this case for checking whether the material is created in both plants. First plant MARC, Material is 938. Here you go. I execute and it is created in both plants. So and a record exists for plant 3000, that is the sending plant. A record exists for plant 4510, which is the receiving plant. I get into MVKE to check whether the material is maintained in sales orgs. So I'll just execute it and it is present in both sales org 3010, that is the sending plant sales org, and even the receiving plant's sales org, or the receiving company's sales org. I have set up the material accordingly. I have the vendor to represent the sending plant. I have the customer to represent the receiving plant. Now we need to go ahead and see the configuration that is maintained under the materials management node of IMG. So you have a node called as setup STOs. And under this node, you have three basic IMG activities which are required to be set up. First one is define shipping data for plants. In this step, you link the, the receiving plant and the customer. So we saw how a vendor is linked with the sending plant, but we did not see how this customer would be linked to the receiving plant so that it represents this plant. So that step is done under this node, define shipping data for plants. I'll show that to you in the system, how I have linked customer CU4510 with plant 4510. Then you have to assign a delivery type and checking rule. So the next node is assign delivery type and checking rule. This node is responsible for determining a delivery type when you create a delivery for a purchase order, intercompany STO purchase order. So usually for normal purchase order scenarios, you don't have a outbound delivery document set up. Only in case of intercompany, you have a outbound delivery setup so that the shipping data and the shipping process is properly tracked using the documents. So in this case, we have an outbound delivery document type NLCC, which is used in case of ISTO, and we have a standard document type NL, which is used in case of intra-company STOs, which is a plan-to-plan transfer. The next node that you see is assign document type one-step procedure. So in this node, you define whether you want a one-step procedure or two-step procedure. Now, what do you mean by one-step procedure? One-step process, this will be better explained by having a look at this particular document flow. What I have shown in this document flow is that I show a goods issue is done, then after that you create an intercompany invoice, then you can process goods receipt. That means I'm showing that goods issue and goods receipt are two separate documents which are created manually and separately. What happens in a one-step process is that goods issue and goods receipt happen in a single shot. Once you do goods issue, it will even process goods receipt in the background. But in this case, in two-step scenarios, you have to process goods issue and then separately process goods receipt for the purchasing document. So the decision whether to set up a one-step process or a two-step process is made by the customizing or configuration that you have done in this node, the third node. So these are the three nodes which are important to us. After this, you need to make sure copy control between NLCC and IV, NL and F8 are maintained, so that we could create a billing document from a replenishment delivery, and we could create a pro forma invoice from the plan to plan transfers. It's intra-company transfers. So what I would be showing you is these three nodes wherein I have done the setup. Let's first see this node, that is define shipping data for plants. In this node, I'll be linking this customer with plant. So here you go. I might be having the node open somewhere. Okay, I got to go to SPRO F5 under materials management. I have the details for STO setup. You have material management, purchasing. Under purchasing, you have purchase order. Under purchase order, you have setup stock transport order. Under setup stock transport order, you have these three nodes. So first one is linking the customer to the Canadian plant. So if I get into this, you see there are different plants mentioned over here for which you can do the linking. So I'll position and identify my plant. So what I'm going to link here is that I'm going to link a customer to a plant so that I could represent that plant with that customer when I'm doing billing. So I need to bill plant 4510 because it is actually taking the material from 3000. So 3000 wants to bill 4510. So when it wants to bill 4510, it should have a customer created for this plant. So let us check what is the customer assigned to this plant. I have already done the assignment. As I have informed you, I created this customer separately in XD01 and assigned it over here. If you get into these details, so this is the plant for which I have assigned the customer number. This way I link the customer to the plant. This is the first step I need to make sure that exists. I made sure that this vendor is linked to the supplying plant. I also made sure that the customer is linked to the receiving plant for billing scenarios. Now the next is define delivery type and checking rule. Now as I told you, purchase orders are usually don't have a delivery type, but in case of ISTO scenarios, intra-company STO scenarios, the purchase order type that will be used would have a delivery type assigned to it. Now let's see whether a delivery type is assigned to it for our scenario. As I had told you, we use a purchase document type NB and supplying plant in our case is what 3000, that is the US plant. If I enter, I have linked a delivery type NLCC because NLCC is a standard delivery type for which you can carry out intercompany billing because the copy controls are maintained. Hence, I have defaulted it to NLCC. So whenever a delivery for document type NB with supplying plant as 3000 is created, it will generate a billing document. So I have linked NLCC as a delivery type in order to achieve or create intercompany billing document. There is a checking rule attached to it, which is responsible for carrying out availability check in delivery. So, and there are a few more fields which are available. I won't be discussing them because at this point of time, this is the only important thing that is responsible or important in setting up the ISTO process. So here I have linked NLCC and let's see what is the de delivery document type in case of stock transport order, that is intra-company. As I told you, document type is UB, purchase order document type, and for supplying brand 3000, you see NL is the delivery type associated with it, which is not linked to IV, intercompany billing. Hence in this case you can only do this delivery type is only linked to pro forma invoicing copy controls, and hence you could only process a F8 or a pro forma invoice for such delivery type. And you need to use UB as the document type for intra-company or plan-to-plan transfers within a company code. Next is assign document type one-step procedure. What does this mean? As I had told you, you need to link a supplying plant and a supplying plant and a receiving plant with a document type. You need to link a supplying plant to a delivering plant with document type, purchasing document type, and set up what type of shipping or delivery processing you want. Do you want one step delivery processing or two-step delivery processing? As I had explained to you, one step means G GR is done separately and GI is done separately, but in two-step processing, GR and GI is done separately, but in one-step processing, you have GI and GR done in a single. So in one-step processing, you have GI and GR done in a single shot, while in two-step processing, you do a GI separate and then process a GR for the purchasing document. For our scenario, let's see what is the setup. I have the supplying plant as 3000. I have the receiving plant as 4510. For this combination, we have the document type NB and we have the one-step setup or one-step procedure activated. That means when you do the PGI, it will automatically do the GR in the background whenever you're processing the delivery for this intercompany stock transport order process. Alright, so this is the setup I have done. While performing the samples or creating the samples, I'll be showing you how the system behaves in if this is activated and deactivated. So I'll show you both processes, one step and two step. So this is the thing, and yeah, I need to show you the copy controls from delivery to billing. So there are copy controls maintained from delivery document to billing document. So in our case, the delivery would be NLCC for ISTO, NL for STOs. So NLCC to IV, there should be a copy control existing, and NL to F8, there should be another copy control that should exist. Here you go. Let me check. Billing type is IV in our case and NLCC first. So yeah, you have this setup. If you get into the item level, so item category is NLC in case of NLCC documents. So let's get into this and check. So you have copy controls maintained. There is one important parameter that we need to maintain, which I'll be discussing when we perform the samples in this copy control setup at item level. We also need to check billing type is F8, that is a pro forma invoice, and NL is the delivery type for intra-company transfers. Yeah, there is a combination maintained from NL to F8, and you have the item category level setup as well. You have NLN. So we have all the details as required to process the intercompany STO for our companies. So we have everything set up and we can now go ahead into the system and process each of the scenarios. So for this session, we'll stop here and I'll quickly create another video wherein I'll display the execution of these scenarios into the SAP system. Thank you guys.